So it's the first time in this building. So all right, so I'm going to talk about continental shelf and particularly the water exchange between the continental shelf and offshore. So I was just talking to Christopher earlier, and he was asking me what skill I'm going to talk about. So that's really between him and the poster there, right? So, okay, so particularly looking at how Gulf Stream warm core rings affect the water exchange across the shelf break. And so this sort of is a summary or overview of this line of work I've been doing over the years. So you can see a lot of collaborators that this stuff looking at physics, looking at the biochemistry, looking at the biology as well. Of course, today's talk is mostly on the physics, but I will mention a little bit about the impact on biology. All right, so so the outline of my talks just to give you a sort of a sense of what I'm going. So first part is talking about why we care about this region, why we care about the warm core rings, why we care about the shelf break region. And then, so in terms of the water exchange, we're talking about water being pushed, offshore water being pushed onto the shelf. So that's the direct intrusion of the rainwater onto the shelf. And then also talk about how the rain will suck or draw some of the shelf water into the slope sea, so the opposite direction. And so that's a two-way exchange, so completed the loop. And then also talk about how the irregular topography, like canyons, affect water exchange across the shelf break. And so that's the main part. And then also the approach I usually take, and so first look at observational data, either satellite or in situ measurements in the ocean, trying to identify some phenomenon or some interesting pattern. And then I always like to use some numerical ocean models, particularly in idealized setup, trying to understand the fundamental mechanism behind that. So today's talk, actually, I'm not, for the sake of time, I will not be able to get into the details how I analyzed the mechanism, but I will just show the result. I show some of the model pattern. And then, so in the end, it's, every time I'll bring back the mechanism. And so that's the approach I like to take. So we're talking about the Midland Bight, as I'm showing here. And it's really bright here. It's hard to see this one.
Dim the lights.
Both. All right, so, but wide continental shelf, we're here. So we have a relatively wide continental shelf, about, depends on where you look at, 50 or 150 kilometer wide. And offshore that, the shelf break goes relatively rapidly into the slope sea, right? So, and the oceanography in this region is also very interesting. So some of you are very familiar, I guess, that the water on the shelf and the water offshore is very different in terms of the physical properties, biogeochemical properties, and also biological communities, right? So let's start from offshore. We all know that we have the Gulf Stream, the mighty Gulf Stream, 2 meters per second going to the northwest and separate from the Cape Hatteras, the northwest. And then the Gulf Stream is very unstable. And you can see from this particular sea surface temperature image, and it's undergoing dramatic meandering pattern. And sometimes these meanders can become so big that actually pinch off and generate this mesoscale clockwise, and so the anticyclonic warm core rings. So this particular case, this is I call it a ring, but it's not a ring yet because it's still connected to the main Gulf Stream. But a few days later, this whole thing will pinch off and generate this mesoscale warm core ring, which then migrates mostly to the west in the slope sea between the continental shelf and the Gulf Stream. All right, and then on the continental shelf, the water is very, as I said earlier, is very different. It's relatively cold and fresh because much of the water actually from subarctic region, Greenland, and go all the way here, travel thousands of kilometers, come through Gulf of Maine and into our region. So you can see the color, the blue is very cold in this particular time. And relatively speaking, the slope water in between is warm and saline. So the slope water is kind of between the Gulf Stream and the continental shelf water. And then, so the water is different in terms of physics, but also biochemistry and biology. And so there's this water across the shelf break is separated by this so-called front, shelf break front. And here I'm just simply using a temperature contour to outline roughly where the shelf break front is at this particular time. So this is the surface view of this front. It's a front for temperature and also salinity and density. Right, so that's a boundary. And so here, that's a surface view, but here I'm going to show you a subsurface. I'll give you a subsurface view of what the front looked like. So here, first, this is the CDD measurement I took back in 2018 along this blue line across a shelf break. So we have temperature, salinity, and density here. So what you see is, again, we have relatively cold and fresh water on the shelf and warm and saline water offshore. And the lines here are isothicals. So you can see right at the shelf break around 100 meters to like 200 meters. This area, you have this condensed isothicals separating these two different water masses. And associated with this front, through this thermal wind balance, some of you taking the physical oceanography class, you will know thermal wind balance because of this density gradient, you actually generate a front and a jet. So this is called shelf break front jet. So this is from older paper along this black line, ship cruise. You see the ADCP measurement of the jet. So this controls. So that's the shelf break front jet associated with this front. So it's coming up on this view. It's coming out of the page. On top view is going to along the shelf break to the southwest. Okay, so that's a setup for the shelf break. And then, so why we care about this region, and we care about it because one of the reasons, at least, is that the biological productivity in this region is relatively high, as shown by this satellite chlorophyll image at this particular time. So you can see that right at the shelf, along the shelf break, the black line, the surface chlorophyll concentration is relatively high throughout the shelf break. So that's one reason. And then the one pattern. And then the question for that is, why? What caused this enhanced concentration of chlorophyll? Over the years, there have been a lot of hypotheses. One of the main one is that it's because of the front upwelling. There is a mean or a strong upward flow right at the shelf break, along the shelf break front, that bring up the nutrient-rich subsurface water to the surface and stimulate biological productivity, right? So we actually worked on this for a while, and then the people also looked at what caused the upwelling. There is an earlier mechanism by Linda and Gawakowicz, and then I also worked on. That's the first thing I worked on when I got to Woods Hole, and looking at the mean flow maybe also cause upwelling. But there are different mechanisms, potential mechanisms, causing upwelling. And then just recently, actually. My postdoc, Bo Jin, we finally, so the people have been talking about this different mechanism for a while, but finally we think we got the direct evidence of this frontal upwelling by analyzing repeated survey across the shelf break here. That's the LTR program I'm involved in. That we finally have direct evidence of sustained upwelling at the shelf break and bring up the nutrient-rich water and just stimulate the biological productivity. So that's a brand new result. We just submitted like last week. And then, so that's the chlorophyll. That's the lowest level of the trophical level. So let's move up to the higher trophical levels. But you can look at on the left, I'm showing you the small whales. So back in 70s, 80s, there was a program. People flew an airplane out and then look the whales, where the whales were, and every time see whale, they put a dot on the map. So this over like 2 years survey. They saw a lot of small whales right along the shelf break. So they like to gather there for some reason. And then let's look at the humans. So those are fishermen, the long life swordfish set, where they put their neck down or their hooks down. So you can see a lot of times they put right along the shelf break. So we like to think there's something going on, something special going on there. And so that's the motivation for why we care about this particular region. And then one of the major factors in this region is the Gulf Stream warm core ring, right? As the title of my talk indicates. So here is another image of the sea surface temperature in this region. You can see the Gulf Stream and also see the warm core ring impinging right at the shelf break, which is the first line is 100 meter isobars, the second line is 200. So you can see the warm core ring impinges right at the shelf break. And then from the scale of things, you could probably anticipate the warm core ring will exert some strong influence on the processes at the shelf break, right? So this is particularly important. Pretty important because there are some recent studies suggesting the number of rings being formed from the Gulf Stream have been increasing. And so this both papers, like Glenn, were involved in both papers, and they counted from the satellite data. They counted how many rings being formed. This is how many rings in that particular box I drew earlier, and so you can see there are some oscillate changes. But then this is the number of rings generating entire northwest Atlantic warm core ring generating entire northwest Atlantic Ocean. You can see some general, there is some increase happening around 2000. So if there's more rings being generated, there may be more impact of this mesoscale process on the cross-shelf exchange, right? So when the ring impedes on the shell break, it can dramatically change the local oceanographic processes. So here is an example. In 2006, I was still in grad school. I remember seeing this photo of this image, and I downloaded and I was printing out and running in the hallway with rubbers, and I said, "Oh, what's going on here?" So you can see the warm core ring impedes onto the shell break, and temperature is dramatically different. So we're talking about from maybe 4 or 5 degree or 6 degree water to 22, 23 degree water. The temperature is dramatically different right across the shell break from this front. So that changes the marine habitat for species. If you care about fish, then some fish will like it, some fish will not like it, right? And then also this is chlorophyll almost on the same time. At the same time, you can see normally you can see a lot of, as I showed earlier, a lot of chlorophyll in that region. When this impingement occurs, the blue means very almost no chlorophyll there. So when that happens, that basically completely suppress or reduce the concentration of chlorophyll. That's not surprising because we know the surface upstream water is very nutrient depleted, not much productivity or relative smaller productivity here. So this is the impact of this process occurring at shell break. So people have been thinking about this for a while. Here I purposely choose a really old image from a paper back in 80s. And you can see that this back then the image is all black and white, the satellite image. And back then they actually named individual rings like we named the hurricane now. So the 79H, this particular ring impinges onto the edge of the Georges Bank. And then, so what this one obvious thing from this is that this is called a shelf streamer. So you can the shelf water being drawn into the slope sea by the ring on the eastern side of the ring. So the shelf, that's one process that ring can induce the cross-shelf exchange. And over the years, a lot of people have been thought about the dynamics of this streamer, what's called shelf water streamer formation. And you can more recently by Brink and others. Okay, so another question then is water exchange across the shell breaks two-way, right? So how could this ring this rain also affect onshore intrusion of offshore water? So this is another paper. This is by Glenn Floro and Brutsky. They were actually thinking about how the warm core ring affect larval transport across the shell break. So clearly, the streamer transporter can bring in, can take some of the shelf species, the larvae of the shelf species into the slope sea. But then in this paper, they have this cloud there. So they said, oh, maybe the ring can also push the offshore water onto the shelf. What kind of process can that induce, right? So that's the first question I trying to address in this talk. And so that's the first part, the direct intrusion of the rainwater, the surface Gulf Stream water onto the Atlantic bicontinental shelf. Okay, so let's go back to this sea surface temperature image I showed earlier. And in this case, we have almost a warm core ring being formed, not yet, but so let's move this image to the upper right, and then look at this ring of this meander again. So to the west of this meander, you have this kind of feature, like we call the limb. It's like the ring is spinning, but it has a limb out and spin with it, but a slower rate, slower speed. All right, so the limb is basically generated by the baroclinic instability of the ring edge. So it's so the Gulf Stream warm core ring itself can be 1,000 or 1,500 meters deep, but the limbs, because it's an upper ocean process, it's relatively shallower, talking about a few hundred meter deep. So that is being dragged by the ring, but being left behind, right? So at this particular time, this is April 13th, you can see the ring or the limb still here, a little distance away from the shelf edge. But then about 2 weeks later, so now we're zooming to this black box region, and 2 weeks later, so and a lot of cloud to the southwest. But what you see here, the limb is actually now reaching the shelf break, the 200-meter isobar. Okay, and then another 2 weeks later, you can see. So now you can see the warm core rains coming, and then also this limb have intruded onto the shelf. This is a 100-meter isobar, and also moved westward right along the shelf break. So that's an interesting pattern, and then so that over these 2 weeks, this limb or this warm water feature has extended by 150 kilometers right along the shelf break, the outer shelf. And then a week or two later, you can see this this limb or this intrusion pattern intrude further to the west, close to the Hudson Canyon. And at the same time, on the onshore edge of the intrusion pattern, become unstable and sometimes generate even finer scale filament intruding further onto the shelf. And then over a few days later, the features start to dissolve. You can see the pattern there become either more water intruding onto the shelf. Right. So the question is, what caused this intrusion from the limb from offshore onto the shelf, right? At least to the outer shelf. And remember earlier we talked about there is a main flow on the shelf break due to shelf break front that moving towards the west or southwest. So the first time when we saw this, we thought maybe it's just a surface layer of warm water being affected by the shelf break on the shelf break from the jet underneath to the west. But is that really the case? So yeah, so what will cause this intrusion from here to there? So of course the satellite image, that's great, give us the pattern, but does not give us the subsurface feature. So very fortunately, we had a glider there. It's not ours, it's the Pioneer Array, the Ocean Observatory Initiative, the NSF program. They had a glider right across the region. So we had a glider transect right before the intrusion occurred, and then a transect after the intrusion occurred. So now we can look at the subsurface pattern. All right, so here is the glider transect. So this is from before the intrusion occurred. This is the temperature, salinity, density. And you can see there's a clear signal of shelf break front. You have the shelf water, cold, fresh onshore, and then offshore that you have slope water at relative warm and relative saline. But then further offshore, you have this rainwater coming, right? Really warm and really salty. And interestingly, because the rainwater is so dense, so warm, the density is actually really low. And red here means lowest density. So actually, this intrusion of the rainwater actually completely switched the density gradient in the region. And some of you operate glider will know why we have no data in the middle, because all of a sudden the glider was not programmed to cross that kind of density gradient, and it would struggle to go down. So like float on the surface for a while, and then eventually they adjusted, so they went down. Okay, so that's before, and then after intrusion occurred, we also have a glider transect cutting through the feature. So now let's look at that water. So this is the intrusion water, warm, saline, and low density. So what they see here is this intrusion layer is not a very thin layer of warm water being carried along by the current underneath. It's actually occupied almost the entire water column right at the shelf break. And so what caused that, right? So the dynamics. So the data itself cannot, it's not sufficient for us to explain that. So then I use an idealized numerical model to reproduce the pattern and then look into the dynamics there, the momentum balance, the vorticity balance. So, but I'm not going to get into the details of that, but just want to show you that this is the idealized model. We have a shelf here. This is bathymetry, shallow shelf to the north, warm core rain to the south, and then the instability of the rain kicks in, generates through baroclinity instability. You generate this kind of limb feature, and then as the limb continues spinning, and then you generate this further. Now this limb is touching the shelf break, the 200-meter isobars, and then sometime later generates elongated pattern onto the shelf break, and then penetrate further to the west. So we qualitatively reproduce this pattern, but now we have this 4-dimensional quantity. We can look into the dynamics. And for the sake of time, I'm not getting into that, but just to give you the explanation. So this is the schematic showing the process. We have the warm core offshore, shell water on the shelf, and then limb touch the edge of the continental shelf, right? So initially, remember in the ring, the rotation, the flow is clockwise anticyclonic, so relative vorticity is negative, and of course positive. In this case, the absolute vorticity together, some of them still positive, right? So we have the potential vorticity is for the water is F plus the relative vorticity over water depth over the layer depth. So the ring itself is spinning clockwise and it's dragging the limb with it, and then the ring itself, because so deep, cannot come onto the slope, but the limb can because it's relatively shallow. As the limb come onto the upper continental slope, the water depths become shallower and shallower. So that the feature being squeezed or be squished in the vertical direction. So that H decrease, right? H decrease in order to preserve the potential vorticity. So assume here everybody knows about the potential vorticity conservation, right? So I guess I don't need to get into that. Right, so potential vorticity had to preserve. That means this upper part, the numerator also need to decrease. The F is not changing, so the relative vorticity has to be further negative. And that means the absolute, that means has to be clockwise rotation has to spin up, right? So when clockwise rotation spin up, and then that means inside this feature, flow has to spin faster. That faster spin means stronger centrifugal force. So in terms of equation, that means the outward momentum of action, it becomes stronger, which then push the water outward. And then of course, right here at the shelf break, we have the topography that blocking it from further going directly onto the shelf. So that actually extend further to the west. That caused the extension of the intrusion and the westward intrusion. Right. So that's the basic dynamics. PV potential vorticity conservation and enhanced centrifugal force push it out. So this kind of feature happens irregularly. So this is another example in 2015. You see the warm core ring impinges onto the shelf edge, the black line, and then it generates this feature going to the west, southwest. And then this is another feature I showed you earlier, and actually just 2 weeks ago there was another one, and some of my collaborators were out there, and they just sent me the photo satellite image back. Say, what's this? I said, oh yeah, that's the I call it Pinocchio's nose intrusion. And I said, oh, that's that. So so it's happening irregularly. Not every time warm core impedes on shelf break will generate that, but sometimes. And so when it happens, it can dramatically change the marine habitat for the shelf break, and also can cause a dramatic, a substantial exchange of heat and salt between the slope and the shelf, right? So actually, and so by bringing the low nutrient Gulf Stream surface Gulf Stream water that suppress the biological productivity in the shelf break region, which is generally high, and also this can not only transport the water but also stuff in the water, right? So there are people caring about how the species from the slope sea can come on to the shelf and actually into the estuary. So this kind of process could greatly enhance that and that migration, right? So that's the first part. So the second part, talking about how now the water being drawn offshore. So as I mentioned earlier, that people have studied this for a long time, that from satellite image, you can clearly see the water, shelf water being drawn into the slope sea. And so here is a few images of that from a more recent event in 2019. And this is from a paper I just published last year. So zoom into the warm core ring. So the black line is a shelf break. And so the ring actually migrating to the southwest. So the different stage of the ring migration. You can see this is surface temperature, red, warm water. You can see to the east of the ring, clearly there is a shelf water being drawn offshore. And then this is the satellite measured chlorophyll. You can see rains here and rains there. You can clearly see the higher concentration of chlorophyll in the shelf water, but at the same time that shelf water being drawn offshore. So that affects the transport of the organic carbon, I guess. So it happened to be that we were on the cruise right in that region. We did not the project was not designed to sample the streamer, but we were doing something else, and then we run into that feature. Say, okay, let's change our. I managed to convince our chief scientist Dennis McKillicuddy, say, let's change our course and do a fine resolution sampling across the streamer. So now this is a group of people we were working with, and so we have all this highly interdisciplinary project. We have people doing all kinds of measurements from chemistry to biology. So we sample across this streamer. So this is a warm core ring. This is a streamer to the east. So change the sampling strategy up, and she went across the streamer. So this is from Rachel Stanley, and she was measuring the oxygen isotopes and argon gas in the water. From there, she went through the magic and can get this net community production in the surface water. So the size of the circles along that ship track, it represents the net community production, right? So you can see in the shelf water is higher, and then in the rainwater and the surrounding slopes water is lower, but then right in the feature in the streamer, it's very high, right? And then those are 3 panels from Heidi Sosik, who have these fancy instruments. It's called a tuned flow cytometer, and it's like medical device people use in the hospital, but she is able to convert that to measure the tiny phytoplankton. And this is less than 2 micron. And you can see there are a lot of in the shelf, and there's somewhat enhanced maybe in the shelf with the ring in the stream of water, but not that much. But then she has another fancy instrument called IFCB, and then she uses a laser to measure what's in the water. This time it's slightly larger phytoplankton, between 2 to 20 microns and greater than 20 microns. So you can clearly see the large phytoplankton. They're the size, again, the size of the circle represent the concentration of the abundance of, in this case, she convert that to carbon, organic carbon. And you can clearly see in the streamer, it's higher, the abundance is higher than either the rainwater or the slope water, which is not surprising because the water came from the shelf. So, but this does say that the stream water represents net export of organic carbon into the slope sea, right? And again, so we were on the cruise, so we were able to do a lot of CTDs across this feature along this line. And here is a vertical section. So here we have temperature, salinity, density, oxygen, and chlorophyll, sedum, velocity, and also a bunch of biogeochemical or biological properties we measure, even zooplankton abundance. So here I'm showing a few of them. So I use the salinity as an outline to highlight the vertical pattern of the streamer. So in this particular case, at this time, across this line, the streamer is about 50 meters thick and about 50 kilometers wide or less than that. So from this subsurface measurement, actually for almost the first time, we can quantify how much fluxes of the different materials this particular event at that time carry in from the shelf into the slope sea. So we know from that we estimate the volume transport, and then heat transport, salt, and organic carbon, and inorganic carbon, and oxygen, etc. And then I don't want to get into the details, but comparing to the estimate from either from historical measurements or from some modeling analysis, all these numbers are significant. So that means this streamer transport, when they occur, they represent a major part of the offshore transport of the materials that keep the shelf system, maintain the shelf system, maintain the shelf balance, right? So, so this is the part of the transport we can see directly from the surface. Then the question is, are all the transport by the shelf streamers visible to us from the satellite? So are there anything hidden underneath that we don't see, right? So to answer that, let's go look at some in situ measurement by the Pioneer Ray, the OY Pioneer Ray, the old one. From 2014 to 2022, a set of moorings being deployed right across the shelf right there, and this is the schematic of the moorings. So here I'm showing you the CDD data from one of the moorings, right, the offshore mooring here. And so I'm showing you this X is time in 2014, and in June 2014, and temperature, salinity, dissolved oxygen, CDOM, and y-axis is depth, right? So you clearly see the surface warm water is close to the summer, it's almost summer, warm water. And what you see interesting is that as time proceeds, you see this kind of pattern. There are events of this signal going downward in time, right? As if the signal is descending downward. So especially for the CDOM and dissolved oxygen. So we know dissolved oxygen is higher in the surface layer, but then at times you can see the high oxygen water being pushed downward, even low below some low oxygen water. So what is that? When we first saw this, we were really puzzled. What could that be? Right. So then we look at the satellite images again, and then this is the same month, June 2014, and those are the moorings, and the offshore mooring is the green one. So we see that from this image, you see, oh, there was a warm core ring spinning around in the region. So this may be something related to the warm core ring, particularly the ring, the edge of the ring. If you look through this sequence, see the edge of the warm core ring through moorings. So maybe this is something related to the ring phenomenon. So, and then also there is a glider transit across the ring edge at that time, again, the OY glider. So now let's look at the glider data. And so, and this is again, temperature, salinity, dissolved oxygen, and CDOM. So what do you see? So this is the rainwater offshore, and you can a subsurface cold layer underneath, and then look at salinity. There is intermediate layer of low salinity water that's clearly came from the shelf, and then below that is actually slope water or rainwater. So there is and then there is also indication of this high oxygen water being pushed down below the rainwater, and then also a little bit signal of the CDOM. So this suggests that there is shelf water, cold, relatively fresh, high oxygen, high CDOM water being pushed or going offshore underneath a thin layer of that going underneath the rainwater. Okay, and so this certainly is not we know there is primary motion here is clockwise rotation. So on the north edge of the ring, the current is very strong to the east, right? So this certainly is not a 2D process. It has to be a 3D process. And so again, for the sake of time, I'm not going to the details, but through some dynamic analysis, we know this is actually a frontal subduction. And it's a submesoscale process happening right at intensifying front. When you have front, so we again ran an idealized numerical model and then qualitatively reproduce this pattern, and then from that model we can analyze the dynamics, the vorticity balance or the momentum balance, and eventually confirm that is the submesoscale frontal subduction. And I'm not going to go into the details, but I just want to explain the phenomenon here using a diagram from Jim McWilliams back in 2009. This is a submesoscale frontal subduction. Again, people have looked about this for a long time, even back in 80s, and Mike Spo in 90s, and Jim McWilliams' group a number of times in more recent years. So the essence of the mechanisms here. So imagine we have the shelf break here, and then we have warm core ring coming from offshore, impinging onto the shelf break. And this is the edge of the warm core ring. So we have really warm and salty water coming from offshore impinge on the shelf break, right? At the northern edge of the ring, it's a density front, right? And the ring impinges onto the shelf break, you actually push against the front, so you actually intensify. So that's intensify the front. So what it does first is, so initially with the ring, you have this sea surface high slope, and it's high in the ring and lower on the shelf. And now you have this ring impingement. You actually steepen that a little bit. At the same time, you have, because the density gradient being strengthened a little bit as well. So through again thermal wind balance, you actually intensify the ring edge flow to the east a little bit. However, these two are not completely balanced. So this shelf, the sea surface height change is more dramatic. What happens is the water tends to flow from higher ground to lower ground, right? So from the rain side on to the shelf side, at least on the surface. At the same time, you have this acceleration of the jet in the core. So, and what happens is, remember, on this offshore side of the jet, you have this clockwise rotation that's anticyclonic, and on the other side, you have counterclockwise rotation. So when you intensify the jet, you actually strengthen the rotation on both sides, the relative vorticity on both sides. Again, through the potential vorticity conservation, this layer on the offshore side needs to shore up a little bit, and the layer on the shelf side needs to deepen a little bit, right? So you essentially have this upwelling on offshore side of the front in the rain, and downwelling on the shelf side. And so this is on the surface, you have the cross on the flow like this. So of course, the volume has to be conserved. So below, you have to have the water coming offshore to compensate for that. And in the ocean, we know the water do not like to cross isobars. So these two together generate cause this flow around isobars going downward. So that's the subduction, right? And so that is bringing the shelf water underneath the rainwater. That's what you see from the guided data. And so I just want to emphasize that this, again, is not a 2D process, it's a 3D process. So the primary flow is still the rain flow that on the edge of the rain is to the east or southeast. But then there is a secondary flow on the cross section. There is a secondary flow going underneath the rain, push the rainwater underneath the rain. And this is also so that shelf water also be carried offshore underneath the surface layer rain, and that's not visible to the satellite. So what do we see on the surface? See the streamer transport is part of the transport, but there's also a part of offshore transport that's hidden to us. So with a numerical model, we can quantify how big that is, and so it turns out to be significant. And so that is the two-way transport of the water masses induced by the warm core rain. Yeah.
What about the shelf break jet?
Yeah. So comparing to the warm core rain, the shelf break jet is a tiny feature. So when the rain comes, it be pushed further onshore or destroyed. Yeah, the flow, like if you look at the flow strength, it's no comparison. One is talking about 1 meter, almost 1 meter per second. Other one's 20, 30, 40 centimeter per second. Yeah. Okay. So that's a two-way exchange. So far, we have not considered topography. So now let's look at topography. So we know the shelf break topography in this region is not straight, right? So there's a lot of corrugations. And you can see from this 3D rendering, you can see there are a lot of canyons. And not only, so this is the northern part, but if you go further south, there are some major canyons there as well. So questions, can those irregular topography interact with this exchange processes? Right, so the answer is yes. And so let's again look at satellite images. And so here I'm choosing again the rain impingement event. So this one, it's in November 2010, and warm core rain impinged to the south edge of the Georges Bank. Again, you can see a lot of, it's hard to see, and it's a black lines, 200-meter ice-spots. There are several canyons here, hydrographer and beach canyon on this here. And this is 3 days later, you can see this thing, again, the limb of the warm core rain impinges onto the canyon of the shelf break and the canyon. And you can see a little bit bumps, like looks like very much correspond to the topography, to the canyon, right? So, and then you can zoom into that. So on the right, I'm zooming to the gray box here, and see even this time, you see that a feature looks like maybe intruding into the canyon or on the shelf through the canyon, and then this definitely see these two canyons, and see there's a two bumps right correspond to the canyons, and then there's the later time the same thing here. So what's going on there, right? Okay, so again, so we now have a pattern, we have a feature, and we want to understand dynamics. Of course, for this particular time, we didn't have any subsurface measurement, so we decide to run a numerical model, idealized, and so start with, let's run two models without canyon, so it's just rain and straight shell break, and then on the right with a canyon, idealized canyon. So that white line is an isobar and idealized canyon there. So this is the day 13, 17, and 22. You can see when the rain impedes on the shell break, it generates this intrusion along the shelf break to the west. So just like we described earlier. But now let's put a canyon there. We see the same large scale pattern still occur, right? And then if you look at details, see more corrugation, right, at the edge of this intruding feature. And particularly, you can see now this is we've got a board here, and see that very much looks like a consequence of the canyon. So, and then let's zoom into that. So that's this gorge, and this looks like some warm water intruding onto the shelf through the canyon, and this looks just like the satellite image, right? So now the question is, what caused that? And so again, with the model, we can diagnose all these quantities. So for the sake of time, I'm skipping that. I'm just giving you the explanation here. So people have been thinking about how flow interact with canyons for a while. And early days, like John Klink and Susan Adams have been talking about it for a while. And more recently, I worked on this with Steve Lenz as well. So I guess just categorization here. So we're say this. There are different categories of interaction. Let's look at the Rossby number, which is how strong the flow is relative to the rotation. Right. So on the left, I'm showing where the Rossby number is much smaller than 1. So the canyon is very wide, or the flow is very weak. In that case, no matter which way the ambient flow is going, either to the right or to the left, and the flow more or less follows isobar. So that's very simple. We don't need to look further into that. Let's just skip them. Now let's look at the Rossby number order 1. In this case, moment under vection is important relative to the rotation, right? So so this case, first let's I forgot to mention one thing. Cost trapped waves. I think some of you might know, and if not, I think Jack will teach. This is for students. Jack will teach you later on. Ask her about that. And cost trapped waves. It's like the Kelvin wave. Have propagate, but it's different from Kelvin wave in the sense that it's a vorticity wave, right? So it propagates with the coast in the north hemisphere with the coast on the right. So in this case, since we have the coast on to the north, so the coast trapped wave tends to propagate to the left. Right? Okay, so right, so let's look at these two different regimes. The first regime, we have the ambient current coming from the right, from the east to the west. So the ambient current is in the same direction as the coast trapped waves. So when the flow encounter the change in the topography, there are some disturbance being induced, and the disturbance will propagate away in the form of coastal trapped waves. Right? In this case, there's nothing to block the waves; they just propagate to the right, and then freely propagate away. So in the end, the flow is able to adjust to the topography, and then and more or less follow the topography, but not completely. And what you see is the flow from the idealized simulation people have done. You see that the flow more take a little bit, goes a little bit deeper, but then come back to the original isobar. So it's more like a symmetric response inside the canyon, and there is not a significant net cross isobars flow in the canyon. So that's this regime. However, if now let's look at the other regime. If the flow is to the right, this case now is flow against the propagation of coast-trapped waves. Remember, coast-trapped waves propagate to the left, but flow to the right. What happens is, again, when the flow encounters the irregular topography, it generates all kinds of waves, and coast-trapped wave tends to flow to the left. And then it happens to be often the case that some of the coast-trapped wave, the phase speed, propagation speed, match the speed of the flow. Then what happens? The waves being arrested by the current. So
where is the canyon? This is looking down.
Yes.
At the surface side.
Yes.
Where's the canyon?
So
what shape is it? Is it like smooth or is it
yes, smooth
triangle or what?
It's a smooth Gaussian shape. So this is the black line, is the isobar.
Oh, that's the isobar.
Yes. So this is the coast. So we're looking down.
Okay.
So the canyon is right here. Sorry, I should have explained that earlier. Just like the satellite image. So we're looking down. Okay. Right. So they have the flow to the right that is against the coast-trapped waves. So there are all kinds of waves being generated, but some of the waves, the phase speed happen to match the speed of the ambient flow. So that wave being arrested, and then all the other waves either being they are faster, then will propagate downstream to the left. If they're slower, then they'll be carried away by the current to the right. And only the waves that match that be rested, be sitting there, so forming a standing wave. That's what this is. So from a standing wave, and then this current eventually come back. So standing or sitting there, and that's a cross isopath flow. Right? At the same time, you also generate a smaller eddy right inside the canyon. So, so that's interesting. And then what happens when you look at it into our model, idealized model, it's actually exactly that. Right. So what happens is you have the warm. So now we're zooming into the canyon. So again, the white line are the isopath. So with the warm core ring much bigger. So I'm zooming into the canyon area. Remember the limb of the ring that impinges onto the shell break onto the canyon. So northern side, the northern edge of the limb have a flow to the right. That is against the propagation of the cross-track waves. Right. So that this time, as time goes, that goes closer, getting closer to the canyon. So that interact with the canyon, and again generate cross-tracked waves, and so if you and then arrest some of the waves. So the waves sitting there. So this is relative vortex. And you look at arrows first. Arrows of 200-meter depth, deeper. You can see certainly there is a cross isopath flow on the eastern side of the canyon, and then the flow eventually comes back. So that's a representation of the standing wave. And then inside the canyon, so this is the color here indicates relative vorticity. You have positive relative vorticity. So that's the eddy sitting inside the canyon. And then so that's you have this flow going cross isopaths going offshore, we eventually cross onto the shelf to the east, and then eventually come offshore. And inside the canyon, you have this small eddy. And then the eddy was able to carry some of the subsurface rainwater, and then also encounter this rising sea slope on this side. In this case, actually bring some of the ship water onto the rainwater onto the shelf on the west side. So that caused this intense intrusion onto the shelf. Okay, if I have time, I can quickly go over this. So that's the canyon. But then in our area, there's another feature that's some of you might be familiar with Gulf of Maine, and it's has some deep basins, and the deep basin of the Gulf of Maine only connect to the slope sea through this channel called Northeast Channel, which is about 250 meters deep. And the channel can also interact with warm core rings. You see all these warm core rings migrating in the region, and then when they impinge onto the shell break, or if happen to impinge on the Northeast Channel, so it's here, then there are also some flow topography interaction. So this is one event in 2017. See the George Spank Northeast Channel right there, and the warm core impinges right to the region, and there's a lot of disturbance being generated in the region. And luckily we have this mooring sitting inside in the channel. So that maintained by University of Maine. Unfortunately, it's not there anymore, but back then was there. And we have this measurement of temperature, salinity, and velocity, and also vertical profile of the velocity. You can see around around this time, you can see there's two episodes of suddenly increased temperature and salinity, and also blue lines of velocity. You can see the positive means into the Gulf. So right in the channel, there is events of intrusion of this rainwater into the Gulf, and then you can they're like 10 days apart, the two events. And then if you look at the vertical profile of the velocity, you can see it's not a full water column uniform. It's actually subsurface intensified. And then so what could that be? So again, use idealized model. We can explain the dynamics. So we have three models. It's actually four, but I'm only showing three in this case. With the base case, we talk have idealized Gulf of Maine. This is our Gulf of Maine, and only part of the domain. So the black line is the isopath. Have the slope sea, deep slope sea to the south, and George Spank more or less here, and this Nova Scotia shelf here, and idealized Gulf of Maine there. And there is no warm core ring in the first case, where so now I'm showing you this is along this line there, thick line there, and this is time. So the Hoffer-Muller diagram, some of you might be familiar with that. So as time proceeds, the velocity, the color here is water flux. There's a little bit, but it's kind of irregular across the channel. And then this case, both cases we have warm core ring. right impinging at the channel. And in both cases, as time proceeds, when the rain starts impact with the channel, you have this episode of strong red, the intrusion flow on this side of the channel. The dashed line outlines the channel there. So, and it's also not persistent. It's actually episodic, and they're separated by about 10 days, which is actually very similar to an observation, right? So what could that be? They're cross-trapped waves. So again, cross-trapped waves. And so just want to show you, this is a cross-section of the velocity right across the eastern half of the channel at different days. And this is the one of the intrusion episode. So red means intrusion flow into the Gulf. Again, it's not, there are some surface signal there, but it's at least there's some surface intensification there. And some of you might know Kim Brink, who has been working on cross-trapped wave for his entire career. And he developed this model, linear cross-trapped wave model. And I apply that in a very simple setup. And this is what, giving the stratification in the topography, this is what you get, the mode shape. And indeed, you'll get bottom intensified wave pattern. And that's, so of course, in that case, you have almost no friction, so you don't have the bottom boundary layer there. But qualitatively similar to that. And also, one nice thing about this model is that it gives you the theoretical dispersion curve, omega k. So that means the wave giving this setup should satisfy, more or less satisfy this dispersion curve. And then from the model, we know the omega, we know the k, the frequency and the wave number, the wave length. And the plugin, that's a triangle. So more or less matches that. So what this says is that when the rain interact with the topography, the topography also excites cross-trapped waves. And of course, linear waves will not be able to carry water mass. But certainly the system is not leaking. The nonlinearity of the system was able to carry some of the rainwater into the channel, into the Gulf of Maine. So that caused this intrusion events. Right, so I think that's it. I think we're right on time. If I guess don't want to get into the summary, just the warm core rain, when it peaks on the shelf rate, it drives the two-way exchange of water masses through different processes, and also topography can enhance that. So all this can, so actually the exact setup will actually depend from the models. You can see that depend highly on the density difference between the different water masses. So it's not a given that will occur every time. And also has profound influence on biology or biochemistry. That's all I have.
Do the tides have any effect in modulating this exchange process?
So we certainly did not look at that specifically into that, but I guess my guess would be not much, because the frequency is much higher. So remember the cross-trapped wave we're talking about.
I was thinking more like when the ring comes up against the shelf break and the tidal current might be making it rubbing back and forth and back and forth.
So that's bottom friction.
Yeah,
you're thinking about. My general understanding is friction will not play a major role. It has certainly some, but may not a major role in terms of the first order dynamics. That would be my, again, we have not looked at that specifically, but that would be my guess.
What surface wind stress, can that be important, or it's negligible? Summertime situation.
Yeah, again, we did not look at that specifically, but I would believe that have surface wind stress can induce other type of exchange process through like Ekman dynamics, Ekman transport. There are papers about it. Like Glenn actually published some of the papers, Glenn Gawakowicz published some of the papers on that. But the mechanism I have described here does not require certainly require the wind stress, but whether wind stress can modulate that process. I don't know, but I was probably not, that's not certainly probably not a first order, I would say.
Yes, this is the interaction between the rings and the canyons.
Yeah.
You had that small eddy forming Yeah,
Yeah.
and then it spills. Its
Yeah,
guts
yeah,
on the
exactly.
side.
That's
That-
the word, yeah.
Does that involve vortex tilting in a way or not? Am I jumping? Because I was surprised how it's. Why was it not symmetrical? Why did it?
Yeah.
Or
So on other member on the other side, there's
Yeah.
already intrusion happening.
right?
Right, so in that sense, there are some symmetry there, but maybe that's overwhelmed by this major current going onto the shelf to the east. Right, so there is already a major current going onto the shelf to the east. So what they are saying, whether this eddy will carry some water mass onto the shelf there as well.
I was thinking the vortex itself is tilting.
Could be. So we did not look at the exact details of that because it's a really small scale. I would say it's more like a sub-meso scale process there. Whether it's tilting, I guess it has to. If you look at the closed eyes about the shell, it has to tilt a little bit. Otherwise, it will not be able to bring that water onto the shell.
Does the pulse, it looks like it has left the canyon, is that a?
This
is-
one,
Basically, there's an eddy that's captured by the flow to the east, and when the flow slows down, this propagation of the wave, all of a sudden, they can escape the canyon.
we did not think that way, but yeah, now thinking, yeah, so it's more like a bolus type of, like, imagine the wave, it's a nonlinear wave carrying bolus, and yeah, maybe, yeah, we did not think that way. We're just thinking, oh yeah, there's intrusion happening, but yeah, that's the suggest I should look into that, yeah.
Well, thank you for a very interesting talk. I've just been thinking about the profound influence on everything you've talked about. It's the rotation of the Earth and the Coriolis force, right?
Yeah.
And it affects the atmosphere the same way the weather we live in.
Yeah.
And with your model, you could play God and see if you slow the rotation of the Earth a little bit, say from 24 hours to 26 hours, or you speed the Earth's rotation up from 24 to 22.
Yeah.
How that would affect all these beautiful patterns
Well,
and how sensitive it is.
I would say it's very sensitive. So we did play some of that in our, so let me see this particular setup, which part. So some of the studies we did change the app. So my general impression, yes, because as I said, even the canyon interaction here, right? So if you change F, you could jump from one regime to another regime, then the response in the canyon will be very different. Right? If you make the F much bigger, the Rossby radius is much smaller, then the canyon suddenly become wide, relatively speaking, right? So dynamically become wide. So the response will be more like this. And then earlier, if you change F, you're changing the radius of the monopole ring, right? So make it either smaller, go to the higher speed of rotation, or bigger, then the dynamic again will be very different.
And also Hudson Canyon, that's a very favorite place for fishermen to go
Yes.
fishing. Then you showed that last slide, you had this like upwelling
Yeah.
spiral.
Mhm.
Could be important.
Well, I would think so. Yeah, that's one of the motivations. So over the years, we've been thinking about that question from different perspectives. Either upwelling bring up nutrients that stimulate the biological productivity and then attract higher trophical level species, and then fisherman goes there. That's one hypothesis and has not been proven yet. Another is the upwelling will bring up nutrients, so it's actually different habitat. On that, maybe some species like that kind of habitat, so attract some species. Another is the geographic setting actually can attract the fossil, like the krill, because they migrate every day, the diurnal vertical migration. They migrate to the surface to feed in the evening, and then the daytime they hide down there. So they want to access the shelf water, which is more protected, more food for them in the nighttime. Daytime, they want to go to several hundred meters. If you come on the shelf, there's no several hundred meters for you to go. But in the canyon, you have the shelf water that's right over it, but then you can go deep. So that may be a geographic setting there also play a role. So we've been thinking along that line, but to be honest, we have not, yeah, so that's something we would like to do in the future.
You know, you dismiss the Gulf of Maine tidal currents, the frequency's too high,
Mhm.
but don't forget, they're the strongest tidal currents in the world.
Yeah.
Well, a long ways from the northeast channel.
I know.
Yeah, so also on the geological spec, you have the tidal ratification.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, that's a mean flow, become a mean flow. So how will that affect the topography? But I don't know. So to me, that's, yes, it's a mean flow, but it's more surface intensified. Right, so how would that affect, interact with the topography there? We're talking a canyon, we're talking about 200 meters or even deeper. I'm not sure. I guess I'm not completely dismissing that, but as I say, that's my guess at this point. We have not, certainly have not looked at the tidal ratification impact on this process. Any questions from the students?
Well, you get to chat with the students at
Okay.
lunch, so,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Gordon, and thank you, so we'll be having lunch over in the Swanson room, so please, join us and chat with Gordon. Thank you.
Thank you.